A good Erev Shabbos, everybody. We'll begin with the Birchas Kohanim. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe Emor. Daber alarm v'abanav lemer keisavarachu es b'nei Yisrael amar lahem. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Yoed Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yosem lecha shalom. V'somei Shemi al b'nei Yisrael v'ani avarachem. First today is Erev Shabbos. It's also a very special day. It's Pesach Sheni. It's called the second Passover. It also happens to be the birthday of my late father. Today would be his 97th birthday, so a very happy birthday to my father. It's also the birthday of my son Abi, so a happy birthday to him. Pesach Sheni. It's actually mentioned in the Torah, it's mentioned in the Bible. The Torah tells us that there were a group of people that were in a state of tumah. They were in a state of what we call spiritual impurity on the first Passover. And we know the commandment of Passover was to bring a Paschal lamb, an offering. The offering was brought in the Mishkan, the offering was brought in the tabernacle. And one who was in a state of spiritual impurity was not permitted to bring the Paschal lamb. Now, there were a group of individuals who were assigned the task. And their task was to carry the coffin of Joseph, who, if you recall from the end of the book of Genesis, was buried temporarily in the land of Egypt. And he told his children to pass on to their children that when God would remember the promise and that God would go ahead and take the Jewish people out of Egypt, that they would remember Joseph and they would carry the coffin of Joseph along with them, take him out of Egypt, and ultimately bury him in the land of Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. Well, they kept their promise. The night before the Exodus, Moses goes ahead, he finds the coffin of Joseph, and he assigns a group of people the task that they will carry Joseph's coffin. We know that they tarried in the wilderness for a long time. It wasn't just a short journey, it was a 40-year journey. And Joseph's coffin was carried wherever the Jewish people went. Joseph's coffin went with them until ultimately, when they cross the Jordan and they enter into the land of Israel, Joseph is buried in the city of Shechem until this very day. But those individuals assigned with the task were in contact with a dead body. And the contact with a dead body, even a body that's been dead for a long period of time, brings one into a state of tumah, and therefore they were not allowed to bring the Paschal lamb. And they come to Moses, and they say to Moses, Lama nigara, why should we be left out? It's unfair. Why should we not be involved in the mitzvah of Passover? We were doing a mitzvah. We were doing a good thing. Moses takes their question to God because indeed it's a legitimate question. And God tells Moses, indeed, to tell them and to tell anyone in future generations that if anyone missed out on the first Passover, they should count 30 days after the first Passover, and they should bring the Paschal lamb 30 days later. A second Passover. And so today is that day. It's the 14th day of the month of Iyar. It's 30 days from when the first Paschal offering would have been brought. Until this day, we mark this day as the second Passover. Those of you that have matzah in your house should eat a piece of matzah today to remember that it's the second Passover. Now the question could be asked, if we didn't bring the first Paschal lamb because we didn't have the Holy Temple, well, we can't bring the second Paschal lamb on the second Passover because we still don't have the Holy Temple. Had Mashiach come in the last few weeks, okay, today would have been Passover. But Mashiach unfortunately did not come, and therefore, why is today marked as the second Passover if there's nothing we can do about it? And the answer is that the message of Passover Sheni, the message of the second Passover, is more than just the Paschal lamb. It's the fact that the Jewish people came complaining to God, Lama nigara, why should we be left out? We want in, we want a second chance. And God goes ahead and says that they're right, that people deserve a second chance, that we deserve a second chance. And this message of, as a nishda kein verfallen, it's never such a thing as it's too late. We're never too far gone. We could never say, oh, it can't be me because I have already, this is who I am and I cannot change. It's not true. The message of Pesach Sheni is that it's never too late, and one can always come to a path of Torah, a path of mitzvahs, no matter how they lived the first decades the second decade, the third decade, 50 years of their life, 70 years of their life. It's never too late. One can always make changes in life. There was a rabbi that passed away in July of 2019. His name was Rabbi David Trenk. And David Trenk was an extraordinary individual, a great educator, and he taught thousands and thousands of Jewish children, and especially teenagers, for over 50 years of his life. He was a wonderful educator. So they tell a story about Rabbi Trenk, that he was a Rebbe in a religious high school, and there was a 16-year-old teenager who was a mischief maker. He wasn't interested. He was there because his parents forced him to be there, but he really wasn't participating well, and he was a troublemaker as well. It was a dorm yeshiva, so they were there not just for during the week, but they were there for Shabbat as well. And this particular 16-year-old decides he's had enough of this. He needs a break. He needs an escape. So it's Friday night. It's Shabbat. All of his students and the rest of the yeshiva are davening Kabbalat Shabbat, are davening the Friday night services to be followed by a Friday night dinner. This fellow breaks into the rabbi's office, steals the keys to his car, and decides he's checking out. Well, a friend of his sees what he's doing and says, what do you think you're doing? He says, I need out. I'm done. I need a break, an escape. But what do you think you're going to do? It's Shabbos. He says, I don't care. I got to get out of here. What are you doing with Rebbe's keys? I'm stealing his car. You don't have a license. I don't care. I know how to drive, so I don't have a license. It's Shabbos. You can't drive a car on Shabbos. You can't steal someone's car. What are you doing? You don't have a license. You're stealing a car, and it's Shabbos. And he says, I don't care. And he leaves, and he steals his Rebbe's car. And he decides that he's going to the movies. There's a movie theater 2 miles from the yeshiva. He drives himself to the movie theater, and he goes into the theater, and he goes into one of the movies. Back to the yeshiva, they're davening in the yeshiva. Rabbi Trenk takes a look around the room, and he notices that his bacharol, this student, who always was noisy, and therefore when he's not around, you knew that something was up because he wasn't there, realizes, where is he? He starts asking around. No one's talking until he comes to the friend who does know. And he says, I don't think I should tell you. And Rabbi Trenk says, I think you should tell me. No, I don't think I should tell you. I don't think it's a good idea. He says, yeah, you have to tell me where he is. He says, well, Rebbe, he broke into your office. Yeah. He took your keys. Keys to what? The keys to your car. To my car? Yeah, he took the keys to your car. And what is he going to do with the keys to my car? Well, it's not what is he going to do, it's what he did. He left. He left with my car? He left with your car. Where did he go with my car? Well, he told me that he's going to the movies. To the movies tonight? Yeah, he's going to the movies. Okay. Rabbi Trenk asks this boy, and do you know where the movie theater is? He says, well, I would imagine he would be going to the one that's closest to here. It's 2 miles away. Okay. Rabbi Trenk doesn't say a word. He asks another Rebbe in the yeshiva if they can fill in for him to supervise dinner. He puts on his coat, and he begins to walk. And he walks the 2 miles. And he gets to the theater. He goes to the woman selling the tickets in the booth, and he says, listen, it's my Shabbat. I don't have money. I wasn't able to carry any money, and I really have no interest in watching a movie. However, one of my students is inside one of the theaters, and I have a very important message for him. So would it be okay if you let me in just so that I can find him, deliver the message, and then I'm done. I'll be out. I'll leave. The woman trusts him. He looks like an honorable man. And so she lets him in. Rabbi Trenk enters a movie theater. It's probably the first time in his life he's ever in a movie theater. And he sees door number 1, number 2, number 3. It had to be one of these multiplex theaters where there's many different rooms. And he starts making his way. Now you need to imagine this. It's Shabbos. He's dressed in his full black coat and his black hat. He's got a long beard. And he's going into theater after theater to check it out, to see where his student might be. He goes from one theater to the next until he actually sees where his student is sitting. And so he makes his way to the row. The seat next to his student happens to be empty. And he very quietly, so as not to disturb anybody else who's there watching the movie, sits down right next to his student. Now, the student is focusing on the screen, but you get the feel of presence of someone suddenly coming in and sitting down next to you. So at some point, he takes a little bit of a glance. And then he takes another glance. And then he says, Rebbe, what are you doing here? I came to see you. You came to see? It's Shabbos. What do you mean? You're in the movie theater. What are you doing here? I came to tell you something. You came to tell me something? Yeah, I have a very important message for you. You have an important message for me? He's expecting to get blasted. You stole my car. I should call the police on you. You drove without a license. You drove on Shabbos. You took my car to a movie theater on Shabbos. He's expecting the very worst. Rabbi Trank says, I came and I walked here to deliver a very simple message for you. Listen, I heard that the popcorn that they sell in this theater is not kosher. I just wanted you to know. So don't buy the popcorn. Have a good Shabbos, my dear student. And whenever you want to come back to yeshiva, I'll be there for you. The boy was in a total state of shock. You came here to tell me that the popcorn isn't kosher? Yeah, have a good Shabbos. And he stands up to leave, and the boy grabs his hand and he says, no, you can't leave without me. I'm coming with you. And the boy and the Rebbe began the 2-mile hike back home. The boy expected to hear from his Rebbe, it's Shabbos. How could you do such a thing? How can you steal a car? Not a word, not a sound. The Rebbe was telling jokes and telling stories. Nothing, not one word of scolding, not one word of condemnation, not one word of judgmentalism. Just happy to be walking with his student on a Shabbos. And when they get back to yeshiva, this boy said to his Rebbe, to Rabbi Trank, I want you to know this will never happen again. I will never do such a thing for the rest of my life. And the reason he said that was because the way the Rebbe treated him, with the love, with the warmth, with the understanding. We all need second chances. Every one of us, in a different way perhaps, we need that second chance. Yes, we make mistakes. We're human. Every one of us, we will make mistakes. We're not angels. We can be condemned for it. We can be judged for it. We can be cast aside for it. God teaches us about Pesach, Sheni, about the second Passover. There's always a second chance. There's always another opportunity. There's another way. There's always another way. Around 40 years ago, there was a woman from the Midwest. Her name was Karen, and she had very little interest in Judaism, but she had a friend who would always try to encourage her to come with her, to go to a lecture, to go to a class. Karen would always push it off, but one time the friend got the better of her and she agreed and she went. And she happened to go to a Chabad center that was having a guest speaker. The guest speaker that particular night was Rabbi Shlomo Hecht of blessed memory. He was a great rabbi from the city of Chicago. He was visiting the town that Karen was in, and he was the guest speaker that night. Okay, it's a large crowd. She's sitting there. She's listening to Rabbi Hecht's talk. And Rabbi Hecht begins that he was a chassid of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, of the Friedecker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. And in fact, he remembers the very last public discourse, the last public speech that the previous Rebbe made. And in that talk, the Rebbe said that sometimes when you hear a talk, when you attend a lecture, you're there only because someone from the heavenly world is actually sending a message to you. And that message from the heavenly world will come via some guest speaker that happens to be in town. The thoughts will happen to come into his mind what he should talk about that particular day, but really it's been planted there by someone in the heavenly world to deliver a message to someone in the audience. That's what he remembers the previous Rebbe saying. Well, that got Karen's attention. That's rather fascinating that you can hear messages from the heavenly world, from loved ones perhaps in the heavenly world, via a lecture that some guest speaker happens to be speaking in that particular room. And so she's quite intrigued by this Rabbi Hecht and the message that he happens to have for them for that night. And he tells a story. He says it was during the end of the war, and those in America understood and heard what had taken place in Europe, and the refugee problem now of all the orphan children, the Jewish children that needed help desperately from American Jewry. So their synagogue arranged a fundraiser, and they put together a campaign, and they raised $180,000, which you can imagine in the 1940s what type of sum that was to raise. And that was to be distributed to refugees and orphans of the Jewish people in the city of Paris and in Eretz Yisrael. They selected a delegation of people that would go and deliver the money from their congregation to first stop in Paris, and then they would go to Eretz Yisrael. Amongst the three that were selected to be part of this committee to deliver the funds was someone named Samuel Broda. Samuel Broda then was the president of the Best Kosher Food Products. Rabbi Hecht continues his story. The delegation came back from Europe, and Mr. Broda gave us a full account of his journey and what it was like. And he said it was a very painful experience. It was an experience he will never forget, to see the orphans and to see the refugees and to hear what took place. There were thousands of also Russian Jewish refugees that we saw there. And he spent a lot of time talking to the people. And amongst the crowd, I picked one child. It was an 8-year-old boy. And I said to this 8-year-old boy, what can I get you from America? When I go back to the United States, what can I send you? I wanted to send him a gift. He would ask for a bicycle. He would ask for a camera. He would ask for a watch, something that I can possibly send this boy. And I kept on saying, what can I get you from America? And the boy says, America, I wish I can go to America. Why do you wish you can go to America? He says, because in America is the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I wish I could see the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And Sam Broider is repeating this to Rabbi Hecht, and he says, it just shocked me. An 8-year-old boy, he's never seen the Rebbe in his life, so only that he's heard about the Rebbe from his parents. His parents perhaps haven't seen the Rebbe in a long time, and yet they speak with such love and admiration about the Rebbe that an 8-year-old boy, when you say, why would you want to go to America, says, I want to go to America because then I can lay eyes on the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So Sam Broider, who is not a chassid of Chabad, is telling this to Rabbi Hecht, who is, and he says, it dawned on me, I live in Chicago, I'm in the United States, I live here, and that I've never seen the Rebbe, and here's this boy, and his dream in life is to see the Rebbe. You're a chassid of the Rebbe, I'm asking you for a favor. Make an appointment for me. I would like to go see him. So Rabbi Hecht says, certainly I will try. The year was 1947. The Rebbe at that point wasn't in good health. This is the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. It was difficult to get an appointment, but he was able to pull it off. And he and Sam Broider, they fly to New York for their appointment. Rabbi Hecht accompanies him just into the antechamber, to the room outside the Rebbe's room, and then it's Sam Broider's time to go into the Rebbe's office privately. And he goes in, and he's there for some time. And when the door opens and he comes out, Rabbi Hecht sees that he's crying. There's tears, his face is red, he's been crying and shaking. And he wanted to give him some space, And Sam goes over to Rabbi Hecht and he says, that was the most incredible, moving experience of my life. And that's all he said. And he walked out. He went into the main shul. As Rabbi Hecht was getting up and getting ready to leave, the previous Rebbe's secretary comes out of the Rebbe's room. And he says to Rabbi Hecht, the Rebbe wants to see you now. Me? I wasn't here for an appointment. The Rebbe asked that I come out and I find you. So I nervously, again, this is all the story that Rabbi Hecht is telling in the Midwest, and in this audience is this woman named Karen who had nothing to do with Judaism. I go into the Rebbe's room, And the Rebbe says to me that Sam Broido was just by me. He was here. He came to see me. You arranged it. When I came to ask him the question of how is his children and his grandchildren, he started to cry. He was crying. And so I gave him a blessing. And the blessing was that he will have nachas from his grandchildren. He'll have nachas from his grandchildren. I promised him that he will have nachas from his grandchildren. And I said, okay, good. I was satisfied, a nice blessing to give, and I left the Rebbe's room. And then Rabbi Hech went on with whatever the subject of the lecture, how that fed into the rest of the lecture. During the entire story, this woman, Karen, is crying away. The lecture is over. Rabbi Hech goes over to this woman and says, I noticed that you've been crying the whole talk. Is there something I said? Is there something that's disturbing you? Is there something that's bothering you? And she says, Sam Broido is my grandfather. She was there listening to a story told by some guest lecturer the entire time about her grandfather. To which Rabbi Hech said, I never understood why the Rebbe insisted on telling me that he gave Sam Broido a blessing that he will have nachas from his grandchildren. I never knew why it was important to tell me. I understand why you told Sam, but why are you telling me? Until this very moment. Because I'm encountering one of Sam Broido's grandchildren right now, in this talk, in this room. And Karen explains to Sam Broido that you should know that when my grandfather passed away, none of his children and none of his grandchildren were part of the pathway of Torah and Yiddishkeit. They had all left the path. And now that I'm hearing this story and hearing of the blessing that the Rebbe gave to my grandfather, I realize who's talking to me now. That it's my grandfather talking. And it's my grandfather telling me it's never too late. It's never too late. And I need to begin my studies. Karen went to Israel. She studied there for quite a long time. She became an observant Jew, a teacher of Torah herself, a wonderful speaker, a wonderful lecturer. You can find her lecturer. She goes by the name Shifra today. Shifra Hendry. I have hundreds and hundreds of lectures of hers on YouTube and on various other social media outlets. And Sam Broido up in heaven is having nachas from seeing indeed that her granddaughter and her great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren have chosen a path of returning, of coming back, because it's never, ever too late. I'll conclude with a short story. There was a joke told in Paris. It went something like this. What's the difference between the chief rabbi of Paris and the cardinal of Paris? And the answer was, to this riddle, that the cardinal spoke Yiddish. The chief rabbi of France did not speak Yiddish. As it turns out, the cardinal of Paris, he spoke Yiddish, a perfect Yiddish. What's the story behind this riddle? Some of you may know that the cardinal of Paris at the time was a cardinal named Jean Lustiger. John Lustiger was the cardinal of Paris for 24 years until he died a few years ago. And his is a story of irony and of tragedy and of pain and of paradox. Because Jean Lustiger was born in 1926 to Jewish parents from Poland, and his name actually was Aaron Lustiger. He was named at his bris Aaron. When he was 13 years old, the German army marched into France. Fearing for his life, like many other Jewish parents, they gave their son away, they gave their child away to a Catholic family in Orleans. While he was there in hiding at this family, he changed his name to Jean-Marie, and he converted to Catholicism. His parents, who were still alive at the time, had heard that he had converted to Catholicism, and they were devastated. His mother was captured and sent to Auschwitz, where she was murdered in 1943. And even after the war was over, Jean-Marie stayed within the church. He was brilliant, he was charming, and he continued to rise within the ranks, first from chaplain, then to pastor, then to bishop, and then to archbishop, and finally made cardinal in 1983. He was a confidant and a very close advisor to Pope John Paul. As a matter of fact, Lustiger's name during the latter days of John Paul's papacy, he was on the list, the short list of those considered to succeed John Paul. He was in that top 5. And someone once asked him what he thought about the prospect of there being a Jewish pope, in which he responded in Yiddish, which was his original language, von dein Maul zu Gott's Ohren, from your mouth to God's ears. And then he joked, wow, what would the anti-Semites do with this? All throughout his life, his Jewish soul gave him no rest. He continued to insist that he was Jewish, that he was fulfilling some special calling. When his actions were condemned, when his identity was called into question, he would cry out, don't deny me my father and my mother. Don't deny me my Zayda and my Bubby. I am as Jewish as all the members of the Jewish people. I'm as Jewish as everyone and anyone that was butchered in Auschwitz and other camps. In 1999, as Cardinal of Paris, he took part in France's Day of Remembrance for the Jews who had been deported and exterminated during the Holocaust. And during this highly publicized ceremony, he read the list of all the victims. And he then came to a name on the list. It was the name Giselle Lustiger. He stopped. He couldn't read the name as he broke down in tears. And finally he said, mein Mama, my mother, mein Mama. As per the request that Cardinal Lustiger left in his will, the funeral for Cardinal Lustiger was held at the Notre Dame Cathedral, but he asked that Kaddish be said for him. I said at the outset of this story that it's a story of tragedy and paradox. There's so much contradiction and inconsistency in his story, because it's the story of the Jewish soul that always wants to come back. It's the story of the Jewish soul that always feels it's never too late, even when it's buried in the strangest of places. But what most troubling about the story of Cardinal Lustiger was a conversation that he had with his biographer. And what he told his biographer that was first published later, that back in the 1970s, he went through a spiritual crisis. And he secretly decided that it's time to come home to his people. He started studying Hebrew in secret. He considered making Aliyah to Israel. He was one day going to get on a plane, fly to Israel, and come back to his parents, and come back to his Bubby and Zaidi, come back to his heritage, come back to his way of life. And just then, just as he was about to make the move, the Pope called him and appointed him Bishop of Orleans, and he couldn't turn it down. And the rest is history. Think of what could have been had he followed the calling of his soul. Today, Pesach Sheni, our souls are calling out to us. Our souls are saying it's not too late. Which mitzvah have you put aside? Which mitzvah have you said it's too difficult for? Which mitzvah have you once upon a time in your life made part of your life that you've walked away from? It's never too late. Take the message of Pesach Sheni, take the message of your neshama, take the message of your soul, and make the effort to make it whole. Come back to the pathway of our bubbies and our zaydis and our ancestors going all the way back to Sinai. I want to wish all of you a good Shabbos. It should be a wonderful week for each and every single one of you, a healthy week. Again, we ask God Almighty for all those that are ill, that He send a refuah shalema, that He send a complete and speedy recovery, and He protect all of us, and all of our families, and all of our community, and all of Klal Yisrael, and all of the world from this virus. Indeed, very, very soon we should be able to be back together again. We should be able to give the sermons both on Zoom before Shabbos, and then on Shabbos in Shul. And you should participate in all classes, whether it's classes from the home front or classes within the academy itself. We look forward to having you. There is an entire list of classes available for you. We made a new page on our website to make everything easy for you. So if you simply go now to jewishacademy.com/weekly. I'll say it again, jewishacademy.com is easy, /weekly, WEEKLY. You go to that page and it will list every single Zoom link that you need for that week. It'll show you the entire week, an abbreviation of everything that's going on that week. So also this coming Tuesday is Lag BaOmer. We're going to have a very special celebration of Lag BaOmer. You'll see it on the website as well. Shabbat Shalom to all.